DJ PK, and we're joined now by Dick Gabriel, Big Blue Insider host and Kentucky Wildcats sideline reporter. Dick, good morning.
Some people call me DG, so
DG,
right in.
DJ PK. All right,
morning.
DG.
You guys, you're up early, man.
Yep. Yeah, we are. That's fact. So the University of Utah announced this private equity deal for $500 million, and we found out Kentucky has done an LLC. Maybe they haven't done the same thing. Maybe they are tiptoeing towards that. We don't know much about this high finance stuff. Explain it to us like we're five, and is it working, and how is it helping? How does it matter to the average sports fan?
I'm a fellow 5-year-old, but what you just need to understand, like all of us do, is it's about revenue streams. College athletic departments have run out of I shouldn't say that. They're looking for creative new revenue streams because, let's face it, what they've gotten in the past, the majority of it has been broadcast revenue.
Yeah.
TV rights, local and national and regional. The SEC network has enriched all these SEC schools. The Big Ten makes even more. I'm not sure what it's like on your side of the country, but it's top heavy over here. But they need more. They're always going to need more. And then every AD, at least in the power schools, Division I, they got stuck with this $20.5 million price tag. You're supposed to spend X amount of dollars on these athletes. Now, where's that going to come from? Well, some schools are going to chop sports. They just have to. They haven't done that over here yet. But, look at a school like Ohio State's got 36. Kentucky funds more sports teams than any school in the Southeastern Conference, believe it or not. Amazingly, one of them is not equine. Here we are in the middle of horse country, and they don't have an equine program, but it's too expensive. That's what they have to look at now. So they're just looking for newer ways to make money. Now they're selling alcohol in stadiums. So they came up here with what's called the Champions Blue LLC that the Board of Trustees here has approved. It's a limited liability kind of holding company deal like you guys have over there. You're about to. And it's essentially been a success here in that it's similar to how Kentucky, UK in recent years acquired two major community hospitals, one in Ashland, Kentucky, and Eastern Kentucky, one in Moorhead, Kentucky, similar area. And they are similarly structured within similarly structured holding companies that do report to the university and its board of trustees. So they had a roadmap that enabled them to see that this can work. Why couldn't it work in athletics? So that's kind of the Sesame Street version of it, and really that's my level of understanding. I just know that having talked to the athletic director here and others, man, they're running out of ways to make money. They don't want to. They're going to have to. They don't want to raise ticket prices. They cannot renegotiate very often TV and radio. What else can they do, right?
How much of that transfers down to the forms of NIL? We at least hear with Mark Pope, we follow him because he coached here, obviously, that the basketball team is well compensated. Now, I know they're having their struggles, but that's beside the point. I'm just wondering how much of all this stuff that's been going on ends up in the pockets of the players.
It goes through that $20.5 million. That's right. Now the rest, in terms of the guidelines, has to come from outside entities, from donors, from companies, things like that. That's some of the structure that Mitch Barnhart, the AD here, has been keeping an eye on. You cannot, and they've moved quickly to shut this down. You can't give a kid a high-paying job. You're going to pay $100,000 to make sure the lights at the football stadium aren't on tonight. That sort of stuff. That's old school graft.
Yeah.
So they did away with bogus jobs, or they've tried to do away with bogus jobs. You can be paid for a job, but it's got to be what Joe Bag of Donuts gets paid, not just a college athlete. So to answer your question directly, it goes into that big pool, the $20.5 million, but a lot of the NIL money comes from outside the university. It has to by rule.
So these people coming in with in the case of you here, these private equity people, they're going to want money back. And of course, Coaches need money. There's travel expenses. You got the whole staff to pay for. Now you're paying players too. So now there's going to be another mouth to feed, essentially. And where's that money going to come from? And I'm wondering how much of it comes from facilities. At the U, they could build a new basketball arena. The old one's been there since, I think, 1969. It doesn't have luxury suites and bunker suites and all kinds of high-end stuff. Maybe there's a lot of money to be made there. Have there been not an investment in facilities like practice facilities and that kind of stuff, which are expensive but don't generate revenue? Have they done stuff with like football stadiums, with Rupp Arena? Have they done anything there? Is there anything you could tell us about how that's worked?
Yes, that's a great question because University of Kentucky is a tenant in the building where it plays. Rupp Arena does not belong to the university. It belongs to the city of Lexington, to the downtown Lexington Corporation, basically. Kentucky rents the building. And there have been years where, back when concerts were much bigger than they are now, they had to work in and around concert scheduling. The first event in Rupp Arena in 1976 was not a Kentucky basketball game, my friends. It was a Lawrence Welk concert.
Well, of course.
It's better now. Yeah.
The Maestro.
And they filled the house. But there aren't as many events like that now. But on the other side of campus, they renovated the Kentucky football stadium several years ago. They reduced the seating capacity, which, as I understand it, is not unusual now, so they could put in more suites. So to answer your question, that's a good question. Yeah, they're making more money, or at least trying to make more money off, of course, ticket sales, but the suite sales at football. Now, you got to have a winning program, obviously, and they just fired their football coach, who had become the winningest coach of all time at Kentucky, 8 straight bowl games. And I will tell you this, and I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but the Kentucky football coach was a victim of his own success. I never thought I'd hear myself say that, but he was. So back-to-back losing seasons, he's out. And now people who were saying, I'm not pouring another dollar into that program. I mean rank-and-file fans, not just boosters, because they're playing crappy football. Well, now they're excited again because they just hired Oregon's offensive coordinator. So the combination of ticket sales, suite sales, alcohol sales, now they've got a plan on the boards for expanding that area around there. Maybe put up a hotel, in a concert area, things like that. But now they're going to have to borrow money from the state to do that. They did renovate Rupp Arena a few years ago, but it was the city that did that. Kentucky does not have a great deal with Rupp Arena. The city gets the parking money. The city gets, I don't know how much of a cut Kentucky gets from concessions and things like that, but it's not a real super deal. And there was a point where Kentucky looked at building an on-campus basketball facility and thumbing its nose at Rupp Arena, but they realized in order to build it to the standards that they want, in other words, seating capacity and everything you need and having it up to code, it would have cost between $750 million and $1 billion to put it on campus. So not feasible. So they got the deal they got.
We see Texas Tech with this Cody Campbell just infusing all sorts of money into their program, and look at them go, right? And we've seen other programs. I'm wondering, from a general standpoint and also from a specific standpoint with what Kentucky's got going on, is that going to be the requirement for success? Is that you must have not just one, not two, and we've seen it with BYU here with their basketball team and what they're doing, obviously. I mean, just the amount of improvements. Mark Pope, I don't think would recognize the program if he came back, and he's barely even gone 2 years, not even 2 years yet. I mean, you just look at the number of bodies because they all wear the same clothes behind the bench. And I was joking last night with Mark Pope's predecessor, Dave Rose, about the number of people on the staff now. And, it's largely they've got these big-time boosters. There was an ESPN story that one booster said relative to the basketball team, you will not outbid us, or we will not be outbid, something along those lines. So is it going to come down to, and what does Kentucky have available as far as those types of big-money guys? Not as much as schools located in the West Texas oil country. And I worked in Texas for a couple of years, so I know what's what over there. And that's an incredible story at Texas Tech with a guy and his partner who started buying up oil leases and or land leases and struck oil. You almost have to do that. But the problem in the state of Kentucky is, while it may be in terms of tradition
basketball rich. It's not a rich state. And there is one man in particular who is a billionaire, and his name is Joe Kraft, and a couple of buildings are named after him. He is an incredibly generous person. He just, donated homes to 10 different families in eastern Kentucky that were wiped out by a recent flood. He and his wife do a lot of charity work, but they're huge Kentucky fans. And, in fact, his wife made it a point of standing in the coach's box on the sidelines with the Kentucky football coaching staff this season. Usually she's up in the suites for much of the game and, maybe on the sideline for the first part of the game. She stood in the coach's box as a show of solidarity with Mark Stoops. Didn't stand right next to him, but so anyhow, they're a big Kentucky fans. But as he put it to one of my colleagues, I'm the only one in terms of the billionaires, and I don't know how many there are in Kentucky, but he's the guy for UK. They've got more than one benefactor, but he's the richest. He's the biggest name, and he's only going to donate so much. So they got to develop some new relationships. But you're right on. I mean, every school that looks to try to outbid people. Here's the problem, though, is now you've got a basketball program that's struggling for whatever reason, and immediately people assume nationwide, and that's just here in Kentucky, that all these kids care about is their money. And I don't necessarily believe that, but it certainly cushions the blow, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, as long as we're talking about the struggles, a lot of people here know Mark Pope because he was at Utah Valley before he was at BYU. So he's got some, he spent some time here to be sure. Kentucky's 6-4. Now, this is just my cursory look, but I see 6 money games at home that they won, that they were supposed to, that they paid to win. And I see 4 ranked opponents in power leagues, all recognizable names, including in-state rival Louisville, and I see losses. So I'm thinking massive amounts of dissension. Is this something they're capable of turning around, or this team is what it is?
Not just losses, butt kickings. That's what's bothered people. I don't think there's dissension. I think there's confusion. And I think the biggest reason is the fact that their point guard, the guy I don't know what they paid, but they brought in Jalen Lowe, who was an excellent point guard at Pittsburgh, not a great shooter, but a great playmaker. He carried that team last year, hurt his shoulder in the offseason, then hurt it again in the inter-squad game, and now he's going to be day-to-day for the rest of the year. It's just a matter with that labrum injury of how much he can take. He played last night, but came in, midway through the second half. Against Gonzaga, it was a nightmare, a disaster, because their shots weren't falling. They weren't getting good shots, and they let go of the rope. And they looked awful to the point where DeMarcus Cousins tweeted that they had no heart. Dan Issel went on the radio. He used to have a radio show in Louisville, and he checked in from his home. I think he still lives in Denver, and said his team is hard to watch. Well, it is, because there's no cohesion offensively, because they've got Denzel Aberdeen, who played at Florida last year, is not really a point guard trying to run the point. And, Mark's got to shoulder a lot of the blame because he built this roster, and on paper it looked great until you realize there's no backup true point guard. And they ran into that problem last year, and they have that problem again this year. So he's going to deal with this, I think, for the rest of the year. He hadn't forgotten how to coach. He did a great job last year. But it's the mix right now that isn't working because they don't have anybody who can get them into their offense. So now when the shots aren't falling, they look awful.
Mark here, to some folks, was perceived as a lot of hype, and how much substance was there behind it. And depending on who you are, I can give you a lot of people who love the guy, and I can give you some people who think he's a big old phony. How is he received there as a person?
Well, of course, this being Kentucky with the Big Blue Nation, you've already got fans who are saying, this guy needs to go, But I wish you may have seen video of the news conference, which was really a pep rally the day he was introduced as the head coach.
Oh, yeah, we saw
And there were a lot of people back then. Oh, yeah. And as you know, there were probably a lot of people who still are skeptical about Pope. Is this the right guy for the job? But Calipari had just left. He had lost touch with the fans, just seemed really distant, seemed that he wasn't more interested in putting kids in the NBA. That wasn't the case. but he talked it up a lot because that's how he was able to recruit top-level players, talking up the NBA all the time, and it worked. Now, he lost too many games he shouldn't have lost, so they needed a break from each other, the school and Calipari. So when Mark Pope came on, quote-unquote, one of our own, said the fans, national champion, he pushed every button in that introductory news conference without prompting from the university. I was thinking, man, they've really prepped him well for this. We later found out he didn't talk to anybody. He did it all on his own. He's a smart guy, you know that. Look, he's a good coach. He is. I think I've known Mark since he was a player here. I produced a documentary about the 1996 team. I did a 1-hour special just with Mark after the championship game. So I've known him for a while. He is who he is. Now, what he showed last night during their win over NC Central, which is not a great team, and they destroyed them, but his backup center, loafed down the floor during a fast break. Pope yanked him, benched him for the rest of the game, visibly upset. Didn't reach Patino levels.
Go sit down.
But yes, go sit down, exactly. That is something that fans had not seen yet from Mark Pope. That might be a breakthrough moment.
Well, DG, we appreciate the time and the perspective. Thanks for joining us.
Anytime, fellas. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Dick Gabriel, Big Blue insider, host, and Kentucky Wildcats sideline reporter. So money is short. You do what you can, but does that close the gap? Does that answer all the problems? Especially when it seems like everything's accelerating.
I don't think the gap will ever be closed. Whatever you are, that's what you are. And then if you close the gap, those that are over there on the other side that you're closing the gap will just widen it again. It'll be a constant uphill battle.
If this turns out to be a home run deal for the Utes,
I hope it is.
Then Ohio State's going to go hit a $750 million home run deal. They'll do it even bigger.
Yeah.
There's no reeling them in.
And then you wonder, is BYU and Tech, are they the new teams, new kids on the block? They've decided we've got this available. And so those people, but they're few, can close the gap. But look at the gap between BYU and Texas Tech this year, and we'll see what it is in basketball when we get to it here next month and over January and February.
No shortage of good teams in the Big 12 again.
Yeah.
The tests are coming. But it's different this year. BYU's tested themselves a half dozen times. Whereas last year, I think there were 1 or 2 tests.
Well,
and it didn't give them a full read.
Kevin didn't have the schedule.
Right. Yeah.
And he changed that this year.
All right, DJ and PK, it's 97.5. We'll have more on that game coming up. What a wild game last night at Madison Square Garden. Stay with us. That's on the way right here on The Zone.